Most people imagine blood vessels as fixed plumbing, as passive tubes whose only task is to deliver blood from one place to another. That idea feels intuitive, but it is deeply misleading. Blood vessels are among the most sensitive and communicative tissues in the human body. They sense pressure, chemistry, temperature, and emotional state, and they adapt themselves continuously in response to these signals. From the largest arteries near the heart to the smallest capillaries threading through muscle and brain, every vessel is alive, dynamic, and engaged in constant conversation with the rest of the body. At the center of this intelligence is a single layer of cells lining the inside of every blood vessel, known as the endothelium. Though only one cell thick, it functions like a distributed organ. These cells release substances that tell vessels when to widen or narrow, when to encourage repair, and when to call in immune support. They monitor the quality of blood flow and interpret it as information. Smooth, rhythmic flow signals safety and stability, while turbulent or sluggish flow signals risk. The vessels adjust accordingly, changing their tone, structure, and chemical output. What makes this system remarkable is how closely it listens to daily behavior. Blood vessels do not wait for disease to appear before reacting. They respond in real time to posture, movement, breathing, hydration, sleep, and stress. A sedentary hour subtly shifts the endothelial environment toward stiffness and reduced signaling. A brief period of gentle movement reverses that shift. The vessels remember patterns. Over days and years, they remodel themselves based on the most common signals they receive. This is how lifestyle becomes biology, not through dramatic moments, but through repeated quiet instruction. Blood vessels are also deeply integrated with the nervous system. Tiny nerve fibers wrap around arteries and arterioles, allowing emotional states to influence circulation within seconds. Anxiety tightens vessels, reducing flow to certain tissues while redirecting it elsewhere. Calm loosens them. This means vascular health is not only about cholesterol or blood pressure, but about how often the body is asked to exist in a state of threat. The vessels are built to respond to danger, but they are damaged by living there continuously. Another overlooked aspect of vascular intelligence is repair. Healthy blood vessels constantly renew themselves. Endothelial cells turn over, damaged areas are patched, and chemical defenses are adjusted to prevent unnecessary inflammation. This maintenance work happens best when vessels experience regular signals of movement and rest. Without those signals, repair slows. Micro-injuries accumulate. The vessel wall thickens and stiffens, not because of age itself, but because adaptation has shifted toward protection instead of flexibility. Understanding blood vessels as living tissue changes how we think about longevity. Aging is often framed as inevitable decline, but from a vascular perspective, much of what we call aging is accumulated instruction. Vessels that have been repeatedly told to expect stress, stagnation, and urgency adapt by becoming rigid and reactive. Vessels that have been regularly reminded of flow, calm, and variability remain supple and responsive. The difference is not genetic destiny alone, but the language spoken to the vessels every day. When we begin to see blood vessels as participants rather than victims, responsibility becomes less heavy and more hopeful. You are not battling your arteries into submission. You are teaching them how to behave in the world you create around them. Each choice sends information. Each routine becomes a lesson. Longevity, at its most biological level, is the art of sending signals that allow living tissue to stay alive in the fullest sense of the word. Gentle, consistent movement may appear insignificant when measured against images of intense training or physical strain, yet at the level of blood vessels it carries extraordinary influence. When the body moves in a relaxed, rhythmic way, blood begins to flow more smoothly along the inner walls of the arteries. This flow creates a mechanical signal known as shear stress, a force that does not injure the vessel but instead informs it. The endothelium senses this signal instantly and translates it into chemistry that protects and preserves the vessel itself. One of the most important substances released in response to this gentle flow is nitric oxide. This small molecule acts as a messenger of ease. It tells the surrounding muscle of the vessel wall to relax, allowing the artery to widen slightly and reduce internal pressure. At the same time, nitric oxide discourages unnecessary inflammation and limits the adhesion of substances that can stiffen or narrow the vessel over time. What matters here is not the intensity of movement, but the quality and continuity of blood flow that movement creates. This process begins far more quickly than most people realize. Within minutes of walking, stretching, or light cycling, endothelial cells increase nitric oxide production. The vessels become more flexible in real time. Repeated daily, these brief moments of improved flow accumulate into structural benefits. The vessel wall becomes more responsive, less prone to spasm, and better able to adapt to changes in demand. Over months and years, this responsiveness becomes a defining feature of vascular health. Gentle movement also protects blood vessels by preventing stagnation. When the body remains still for long periods, blood flow becomes slower and more uneven, especially in the lower extremities. Endothelial cells interpret this sluggish flow as a warning signal. Protective mechanisms activate, increasing stiffness and reducing chemical generosity. Regular movement interrupts this pattern. Even short bouts restore smooth circulation, reminding the vessels that mobility remains part of daily life. There is a subtle elegance to how the vascular system distinguishes between helpful and harmful stress. Sudden, intense exertion can create turbulent flow that challenges weakened vessels, while gentle movement creates a steady rhythm the endothelium recognizes as beneficial. This is why consistency matters more than force. Blood vessels evolved to support frequent movement across long spans of time, not rare bursts of extreme effort followed by long inactivity. Gentle movement also improves how vessels communicate with the rest of the body. As nitric oxide increases, insulin sensitivity improves, oxygen delivery becomes more efficient, and tissues receive nutrients with less resistance. The vessels become better partners to the organs they serve. Muscles recover faster, the brain receives steadier perfusion, and the heart works with less strain. None of this requires exhaustion. It requires participation. Perhaps the most important insight is that gentle movement lowers the biological cost of living. Instead of forcing the body into emergency adaptation, it invites cooperation. The vessels respond with flexibility rather than defense. In this way, small daily movement becomes a form of biological reassurance. It tells the circulatory system that the environment is safe enough to remain open, that flow can continue without alarm, and that repair is allowed to outpace damage. Over time, this habit reshapes the internal landscape. Blood vessels that are regularly exposed to smooth flow retain their elasticity longer. They resist calcification, inflammation, and excessive narrowing. They age more slowly not because time has stopped, but because the signals they receive encourage renewal instead of withdrawal. Gentle movement does not demand attention or admiration, yet it quietly trains the vascular system to remain adaptable, responsive, and alive. The human instinct to equate benefit with intensity is deeply ingrained, yet blood vessels operate by a different logic. They are less impressed by extremes and far more influenced by patterns. From a vascular perspective, what happens most often matters more than what happens occasionally. A single intense workout may raise the heart rate dramatically, but if it is followed by long periods of stillness, the vessels receive a mixed message. In contrast, frequent moderate movement offers a clear and consistent signal that circulation is meant to remain active throughout the day. Blood vessels adapt through repetition. Endothelial cells change their behavior based on the flow they experience most regularly. When movement is infrequent, vessels spend most of their time in a low-flow state. This encourages stiffness, reduced nitric oxide production, and a heightened inflammatory tone. An occasional surge of intense activity cannot fully reverse this environment because the underlying pattern remains one of inactivity. Frequency reshapes the baseline, while intensity only creates temporary deviation from it. There is also a biological memory within the vascular system. Repeated exposure to smooth blood flow trains the vessels to respond more efficiently. Over time, arteries become better at dilating quickly and returning to baseline without overshoot. This efficiency reduces wear on the vessel wall. In contrast, rare intense exertion creates abrupt changes in pressure and flow that can stress vulnerable areas, especially in vessels already conditioned to inactivity. Frequency builds resilience by normalizing movement rather than shocking the system. Another reason frequency matters lies in how blood vessels interact with metabolism. Regular movement improves glucose handling and lipid transport throughout the day, not just during the activity itself. Blood vessels help regulate how nutrients reach tissues. When movement occurs often, this delivery system stays tuned. Long gaps between activity allow metabolic byproducts to linger, increasing oxidative stress within the vessel wall. Frequent movement prevents these accumulations from becoming the default state. The nervous system also responds differently to frequent versus intense movement. Gentle, repeated activity lowers resting sympathetic tone, allowing blood vessels to spend more time relaxed rather than constricted. This baseline relaxation reduces blood pressure variability and improves endothelial repair. Intense activity can be beneficial when layered onto a foundation of regular movement, but without that foundation it may temporarily amplify stress responses that leave vessels less protected afterward. Frequency aligns with how humans evolved. Our circulatory system developed in an environment of near-constant low-level movement, punctuated by occasional bursts of effort. Modern life has inverted this pattern, replacing daily motion with prolonged sitting and sporadic exertion. Blood vessels still expect the old rhythm. When they do not receive it, they adapt in ways that prioritize protection over flexibility. Frequent movement restores a familiar biological cadence. What makes this insight empowering is its accessibility. Frequency does not require special equipment, schedules, or recovery protocols. It asks only for regular reminders that the body is meant to circulate. Standing, walking, stretching, or moving lightly several times a day all count. Each instance reinforces the message that flow is normal, that pressure changes are gentle, and that the vessel wall can remain responsive. Over years, these small repetitions shape the architecture of the vascular system. Arteries maintain elasticity, microvessels remain open, and communication between tissues stays efficient. Intensity may add strength at the margins, but frequency determines the terrain on which strength can safely exist. Blood vessels thrive when movement is woven into the fabric of daily life, not isolated as a rare event to be endured and recovered from. Blood vessels do not exist in isolation from the mind. They are continuously shaped by signals from the nervous system, responding moment by moment to whether the body perceives safety or threat. When stress becomes chronic, the sympathetic branch of the nervous system dominates, tightening vessels and increasing resistance as if danger were always near. This state is useful in emergencies, but damaging when it becomes the background of daily life. Gentle movement offers a biological counterbalance, one that speaks directly to both the nervous system and the vascular network. When the body engages in calm, rhythmic movement, sensory feedback from muscles and joints travels to the brain, signaling stability rather than urgency. Breathing naturally deepens, heart rate settles into a smoother pattern, and parasympathetic activity increases. This shift changes how blood vessels behave. Instead of remaining constricted and vigilant, they begin to relax. Arteries widen slightly, blood pressure stabilizes, and circulation becomes more efficient with less force required from the heart. This nervous system regulation has direct consequences for vascular health. Reduced sympathetic tone lowers the constant mechanical strain placed on vessel walls. Each heartbeat becomes less abrasive. Over time, this reduction in strain decreases micro-damage to the endothelium and allows repair processes to keep pace. Inflammation, which often rises under chronic stress, diminishes when the nervous system spends more time in a state of calm engagement rather than defensive readiness. Heart rate variability offers a window into this process. Higher variability reflects a nervous system capable of adapting smoothly to changing demands. Gentle movement improves this adaptability. As variability increases, blood vessels benefit from more rhythmic, predictable pressure patterns. The vessel wall responds by maintaining elasticity and chemical balance. This rhythm is not dramatic, but it is deeply protective. Calm movement also influences hormonal signaling that affects blood vessels. Stress hormones encourage constriction and inflammatory signaling, while calmer states support repair and growth factors that maintain vascular integrity. By regularly reducing stress hormone exposure, gentle movement shifts the internal environment in which blood vessels operate. The result is not just temporary relaxation, but a long-term change in how vessels interpret the world around them. There is a psychological dimension to this regulation that cannot be separated from biology. When movement is approached without urgency or self-punishment, the brain learns that physical activity is safe. This reduces anticipatory stress, which itself has vascular consequences. Blood vessels respond not only to what the body does, but to how it expects to feel. A habit of calm movement retrains expectation, allowing vessels to remain more open even outside periods of activity. The interplay between nervous system and circulation becomes especially important with age. As regulatory flexibility declines, blood vessels become more sensitive to stress signals. Gentle, consistent movement helps preserve this flexibility, keeping the feedback loop between brain and vessels responsive. It does not eliminate stress from life, but it reduces the physiological cost of experiencing it. In this light, movement becomes more than a mechanical act. It is a form of nervous system hygiene, a way of reminding the body that not every moment requires defense. Blood vessels respond by shifting from a posture of tension to one of cooperation. Over time, this shift alters the baseline state of circulation, favoring repair, adaptability, and balance. Longevity emerges not from forcing the body to endure stress, but from teaching it when to let go. Longevity often collapses under the weight of unrealistic expectations. Many health strategies fail not because they lack biological merit, but because they ask humans to behave in ways that are unsustainable. Blood vessels, however, respond best to habits that fit naturally into daily life. They do not demand perfection or heroic discipline. They adapt to what is repeated, to what feels normal, to what can be maintained even when motivation fades. This is where alignment with human nature becomes a powerful biological advantage. A habit that respects human nature is one that tolerates inconsistency without collapsing. Gentle daily movement is exactly that. Missing a day does not erase the signal built over weeks. The vascular system responds to long-term patterns, not isolated lapses. This forgiveness reduces psychological stress, which itself protects blood vessels. When habits feel fragile, the body often pays the price of anxiety and self-judgment. When habits feel resilient, the nervous system remains calmer, and circulation benefits. Blood vessels are designed to age with us, not against us. As years pass, recovery capacity changes, energy fluctuates, and priorities shift. Habits that rely on intensity or strict schedules often fail at these transitions. Sustainable movement adapts instead of resisting. It can become slower, shorter, or gentler while still delivering the signals vessels need. This adaptability allows vascular health to persist across decades, not just phases of peak performance. There is also a social dimension to sustainability. Habits that integrate into normal life are more likely to be shared, repeated, and reinforced. Walking, light activity, and everyday movement fit into conversations, relationships, and routines. Blood vessels benefit from this continuity. Regular signals of flow maintain endothelial function and keep communication between tissues intact. Isolation and rigidity, whether physical or behavioral, often mirror vascular stiffness. Compassion toward the body plays an underappreciated role in vascular longevity. When movement is framed as care rather than correction, stress responses diminish. Blood vessels sense this shift indirectly through hormonal and neural pathways. Lower cortisol exposure, steadier heart rhythms, and improved sleep all contribute to vascular repair. The body thrives when it is not constantly being told it is failing. Sustainable habits also acknowledge that health is not linear. There are periods of illness, fatigue, or disruption. Blood vessels adapt during these times based on prior conditioning. A history of gentle, consistent movement provides a buffer. Even when activity temporarily decreases, the vascular system retains flexibility and chemical balance longer. This resilience is not built in moments of intensity, but through years of reasonable repetition. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of sustainability is identity. When movement becomes part of who someone is rather than something they force themselves to do, the vascular system receives more consistent signals. Identity-driven habits require less willpower and generate less internal conflict. Blood vessels, sensitive to stress and rhythm, benefit from this ease. Flow becomes expected rather than exceptional. Longevity, in this sense, is not about extending life through struggle. It is about creating conditions in which life can continue unfolding with less resistance. Blood vessels respond to kindness as surely as they respond to chemistry. When habits align with human nature, the circulatory system remains open to adaptation, repair, and change. Time does not feel like an enemy to be outrun, but a companion the body knows how to travel with.